just will continue replaying in my memory, and I'll always have flashbacks of that moment when I was running to the exit.
A judge in Kenya is expected to announce a verdict against 3 suspects accused of aiding the attackers and of conspiring to commit terrorism, among other charges.
I really do hope that on the day of the sentencing, the judge rules that these people are responsible for the attack and they get sentenced to death, and we can finally move on with lives and get the closure that we truly deserve. Because these past few years, 7 years that have passed, haven't been easy on us, and I feel like this is what we need to just go about our lives and move on and finally close this chapter.
The suspects have denied all the charges. 4 others suspected of carrying out the Westgate attack are believed to have been killed in the 4-day standoff. Chamhono, CGTN.
Over in Sudan, people are in a celebratory mood after the transitional government and a coalition of armed groups finally signed a peace deal. The leaders say they want to help bring democracy and peace to the country after more than 17 years of armed conflict. Patrick Oyet has the details.
The agreement provides for the return of refugees to their own homes without being prosecuted, even if they had been part of any opposition armed group in Sudan. Sudan's government says the agreement marks an end to war in the country.
We are ready to work with all groups for peace. Sudan belongs to all of us. We have fought for long and war has not benefited us. I call on all Sudanese to come together and work for lasting peace in our country.
However, 2 armed groups reject the current peace process. They say they need a separate implementation plan. The 2 armed groups are also demanding that their armies should not be reintegrated into Sudan's armed forces for at least 20 more years. They further want the constitution of Sudan changed, declaring Sudan as a secular state as opposed to the current Islamic state. But the 7 armed opposition groups forming Sudan's Revolutionary Front that signed the deal are reiterating their commitment to the deal.
This is a historical day for us. We believe that this is the beginning of a great Sudan, a Sudan where there is justice, where there is equality, and where there is peace.
South Sudan, which mediated the peace deal, is calling on Sudanese peace parties to fully implement the deal.
Also see our mediation as a payment of a huge debt of gratitude we owe the Sudan for the role it played and continues to play as a member of IGAD and as a grantor of our peace agreement.
Some members of the international community are pledging support for Sudan's peace process.
This historic achievement addresses decades of conflicts and suffering. It also requires a firm and unwavering commitment to implement the agreement fully and without delay.
The peace deal is seen as important for Sudan because it would cut spending on the military and provide the much-needed funds to stabilize the economy. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
The signing of the peace agreement has been welcomed across the region, but there are concerns after 2 powerful rebel groups, the Darfur-based Sudan Liberation Movement and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement North, did not sign. Joining us live now from Cairo is Bassem Ali, a researcher on international politics at Cairo University and editor at Ahram Online in Cairo. Bassem, what does the absence of these 2 rebel groups in the peace deal mean for Sudan?
I think now we have three key issues to look at. Firstly, those rebel groups, by refusing to sign the deal, at least in the meantime, they are sending a message to the transitional authorities that they have concerns that need to be addressed. Secondly, this shows also that transitional authorities need to do more effort in terms of negotiating with those groups who refuse to sign the deal, especially in terms of responding to their demands, which we will get into within minutes. And thirdly, this implicitly shows that Sudan is still at the risk of resuming conflict between state forces and those rebel groups in case no understandings have been reached, as it has been successfully finalized with those who signed the deal yesterday.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those demands by the Sudan Liberation Movement North before it can agree to a peace deal. And those demands include separation of religion and state and the disbanding of former President Bashir's militias. Why are these issues a big deal for this group?
Let's put into consideration the key statement that has come out of the transitional authorities in Sudan, by which they said they're looking to achieve peace and democracy. In that sense, the rebel groups that opposed yesterday's deal are mainly telling them, if you're seriously looking forward to peace and democracy, then show us that it is actually part of your political and constitutional framework. Let's not forget that Omar al-Bashir has strongly empowered Islamists and arguably counted on an Islamist narrative in his political discourse, while at the same time counting on armed militias in Sudan's civil wars, which eventually led to the arrest warrant that has been issued by an international court against him. So the rebel groups are mainly saying, we are not against the peace process, but firstly, show us that the political environment has changed, and on that basis we are ready to sign the deal and go for peace just as others have did.
So with that in mind, Bassem, what remains to be done to put Sudan firmly on the path to a stable future, in your opinion?
In fact, a long list of issues needs to be achieved in order to make sure that peace will be sustained in Sudan. Firstly, Sudan needs to solve its economic crisis in order to fund the process of socially and economically developing the impoverished areas or the peripheral parts of the country in which the rebel groups have came from. Part of the deal has reportedly involves an almost $1 billion fund to those areas. But in fact, as more and more people returns to their homeland and internally displaced people follow them, Sudan will face the challenge of dealing with the social and economic implications of their return, the education, their health care, offering jobs for families, developing infrastructure, attracting foreign investments. A long list of issues needs to be addressed in order to make sure that there is a strong foundation for peace. And I think key to this is lifting Sudan's name out of the states that fund terrorism by the United States, which in fact transitional authorities have spoken with US officials in past weeks and months about it. This comes on top of the lists, and then it has to be followed by clear rules and dynamics for the representation of those rebel groups in government and in the cabinet, which is also part of the deal. How would they be represented? To what extent? What portfolios would they be allowed to manage? This also is another concern. A third concern, in fact, is finalizing the deal with the rebel groups that did not sign it until now. Peace, as you know, is covers many parts of the country, and making sure that everyone is satisfied while at the same time involved in the peace process is also key to this process. So once these issues are addressed and successfully finalized, we will make sure that Sudan ends up in peace.
All right, Bassem, thank you for that. We've been speaking to Bassem Ali, a researcher on international politics at Cairo University and editor at Ahram Online in Cairo. This is Africa Live. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back.
On CGTN, Africa's first installment of the Food Production in Africa series, tomorrow we bring you stories on support to farmers from Kenya's village-based advisors, DRC's farming in conflict, and Ethiopia's commodity exchange. Stay tuned.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
South African scholars have hailed China's journey in protecting and promoting women's rights. They say since the commission of the World Conference on Women in Beijing, China has established a comprehensive legal system for the protection of women's rights and interests, including more than 100 laws and regulations.
China has been a global leader. President Xi Jinping makes reference to the 100 laws and regulations that have been put in place in China. And this draws essentially from the letter and spirit, of the Beijing platform. And China, since 1949 has had a very progressive agenda on the empowerment of women. This has now been institutionalized in law and practice in Beijing. For example, China has very rigorous laws on domestic violence. It's got very important laws on the promotion of women in the economy and enterprise development. It has got very important laws on allowing girls equal access to education.
I like that comment around genuine gender equality. That's what we need to focus on. Not lip service, not the idea that we just talk about it on paper. And I think he was right, and he rightly put it, if we are going to eradicate violence against women, we need to make sure that there's gender equality.
A social rights activist in Somalia has been shortlisted for the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize Award. Ilwad Elman has been at the forefront of the country's peace process. CGTN's Joy Kiruki has the details.
Meet Ilwad Elman, a 30-year-old woman on a mission. As the co-founder of the Elman Peace and Human Rights Organization, she's out to restore peace and dignity in Somalia in her own way.
Our belief is humanitarian aid does not have to be sad. It could be a rejoiceful, fun celebration of community. So you know what I'm about to do? DJ!
Elman wears many hats. She was voted the winner of the African Young Personality of the Year during the 2016 Africa Youth Awards. She is a member of the advisory group for the UN Peace Building Fund, and she's a part of a number of other UN expert groups. Elman, who spent her childhood in Canada, said she returned to Somalia years after her father was killed for the work he was doing.
I decided to leave Canada and return to Somalia to pick up the torch of activism, to continue the work that my father started under the Drop the Gun, Pick Up the Pen initiative, to work on the disengagement, rehabilitation, and reintegration of children that are disassociated from armed forces and groups. And although it has been 20 years since my father was killed for this work, the disarmament and reintegration work he incepted in Somalia remains incredibly relevant and necessary today, in Somalia and as this informal meeting brings to attention around the world.
Elman also lost her sister Almas, an aid worker, in November 2019 to a gunshot wound that killed her in Mogadishu. Her other sister, Iman, is a commander in the Somali Armed Forces. And now Elman is a possible contender for the Nobel Peace Prize. The winner of the $1 million prize will be announced in Oslo on October 9th. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The Egyptian Tourism and Antiquities Ministry has unveiled 59 ancient wooden coffins in the Saqqara necropolis. The discovery was made at the UNESCO World Heritage Site south of Cairo in August. The coffins, believed to date back 2,500 years, are said to be in perfect condition. The Egyptian archaeological mission behind the discovery embarked on the mission in 2018. They have so far unveiled 3 burial shafts at differing depths. The coffins are believed to belong to priests and officials from the 26th dynasty.
I'm very proud that this discovery of today, with 59 wooden coffins in perfect condition of preservation, was done by Egyptian mission and Egyptian hands. This discovery, the entire 59 wooden coffins, will be displayed in the Grand Egyptian Museum, the most famous museum, and it's the gift of the century. When we were preparing for this announcement, we found a little hole, was a bit sealed. We did open it and we found a surprise. We found a bunch of coffins. I don't know how many, but it seems to me they are tens of wooden coffins. Very soon, we're going to continue our excavations to reveal the rest of the sand of Saqqara.
You're watching Africa Live. There's plenty more coming up after the break, including this. A special series, China Express, a thrilling journey across the country on its extensive high-speed rail network.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
All right, to a special series now, China Express, a thrilling journey across the country on its extensive high-speed rail network. A bullet train today takes us to Beijing. Along the Beijing-Shanghai high-speed rail line, we will roam about one of the world's leading centers for culture. It's a chance to appreciate the charm of Kunchu opera and the legacy of the ancient philosopher Confucius and his thoughts. Now let's check on the journey of my colleagues Julian Wakan and Weilin Tang about a high-speed bullet train from Shanghai to Beijing.
So we're aboard the high-speed bullet train again, going from Shanghai back to Beijing, and our next stop is going to be Suzhou. Now, I'm already missing the food from Shanghai. The food was amazing, but the wait, of course, was a little long. And that makes sense because we're on day 4 of an 8-day National Day holiday, which also coincided with the Mid-Autumn Festival this year.
That's right. So we had to queue up at the restaurant in Shanghai, but it's nice to see this this consumer sentiment picking up. So again, we're on board the Beijing-Shanghai Railway, and Beijing and Shanghai, they're 2 of China's most important cities. But what's amazing about this high-speed railway is that it actually brings us to places beyond just these 2 cities. So this line specifically runs through 4 provinces, including Shandong and Jiangsu, but as well as 3 municipalities.
And that's really incredible because this line alone connects about roughly 30% of the entire Chinese population, as well as the Bohai and Yangtze River Delta economic hubs.
That's right. So our next stop will be Suzhou, which is about 100 kilometers away from Shanghai, and it will take us just about slightly over 20 minutes.
And along this line, if you have time, you should also visit Wuzhen. That is the most historic and picturesque water town. It's just about an hour ride away from Shanghai, and that's where the annual Wuzhen Theater Festival takes place every year, usually in October.
And also to add on to that, Trifu is another stop along this route, and Trifu, of course, is very famous for being the birthplace of Confucius. Exactly, and it's located in Shandong province.
Now, when I think of Shandong, I think of baozi, these steamed buns with fillings. I'm such a gourmet, I know. But one thing that I noticed in Shanghai is that the buns, these steamed buns, are really, really small and really tiny, whereas in Shandong they are humongous. And this applies to almost everything in Shanghai, in Shandong. Things are really teeny tiny. For instance, the Suzhou Gardens are very ornate and exquisite. But if you go up north, things become more majestic and imposing.
And it's so nice being on a high-speed railway like this because there are many stops along the way, and you can just stop at one of them and really explore the local culture, the traditions, and delicacies. So it actually brings people closer together, I feel. So, it's right now the holiday season. According to C-Trip, which is one of China's leading travel agencies, Beijing-Shanghai is actually still one of the hottest routes in the list.
I can imagine that. It's always been very popular, and right now there are a lot of people aboard our train going to different places. Maybe let's go and check out some of their thoughts in terms of where they're going to go and visit. Take a listen.
I'm going to Beijing, and then after 3 days I'm going to Huangshan. But at the moment, I'm on my way to Beijing. Friends of mine are already there. Tomorrow we will probably visiting the Forbidden City, if it's possible to have tickets. Yeah. And maybe on Friday the Great Wall to see it. I don't know. We have to book it, but it's a spontaneous trip, so we will see. I'm excited. Yeah.
Beihai. Yeah, I think that is a very beautiful place to visit. I have been there last year, and I was very surprised because Beihai is a very small city, and not a lot of people will visit there. So it is a very good place to visit for travel.
I think there's nothing in particular we're looking forward to. You're excited about the shopping and the French Quarter. I'm just excited to relax in a different city.
Let's have a look at some numbers in China. Tourism is seeing a major rebound with hundreds of millions of people on the move. On Saturday alone, attractions and businesses recorded more than 110 million tourist visits. This has generated a total revenue of $11.5 billion US. This is about 2/3 of the amount on the same day last year. And China's railway network saw over 10 million trips per day from Wednesday to Friday. The rail system in the Yangtze River Delta region registered over 2 million trips per day during the same period. A mass stop from Shanghai to Beijing is Suzhou city, as my colleagues Julian Wakkan and Weilin Tang found out. What's the difference between Suzhou and Shanghai? The metropolis.
So we just arrived here in Suzhou North Station. Suzhou is about only a little bit over 20 minutes by the high-speed bullet train west of Shanghai. And I cannot tell you how different this place feels. This 2,500-year-old city feels from Shanghai, the big metropolis.
Exactly. So it is a contrast, right? Just 20 minutes before we were feeling the hustle and bustle of Shanghai, China's commercial capital. But right now we're in a completely different place, different province, different city. So I think that's the beauty of China's high-speed railway. It has really made all these maybe previously uncovered gems now much more available, much more accessible to the public.
Exactly. One thing that I'm really surprised to find out before I came out, on this China Express tour is that these high-speed bullet trains connects not only the big metropolises such as Shanghai and Beijing, but also the smaller cities such as Hangzhou and Suzhou that are steeped in history, but also are the roots of Chinese culture.
Exactly. But we're here today for a very specific reason, a reason that Julian has been looking forward to for some time now. Why not you tell us all about it?
Well, we're going to go and visit a lot of the historical places, including the bridges, the pagodas, as well as the bullet train, as well as the canals, the water canals. Suzhou is known as the Venice of the East, and of course also Kunchi Opera.
Exactly. So it's said to be the mother of all Chinese operas, and you don't want to miss seeing Julian all made up and perhaps try playing a woman's role like how it's conventionally done in the past.
Am I going to do that? Well,
you told me you were looking forward to doing that.
No. Well, let's see what happens. Kunchi was born in the Kunshan area in Suzhou in the 14th century, hence the name Kunchi or Kun Melodies. It's a combination of play, opera, ballet, mime, and poetry recital. Here at the Suzhou Kunchi Opera Theater, actors are busy rehearsing for their evening performance. And you might be surprised to find that the principal actors here playing extras in a different production because there is no hierarchy of roles for actors in Kunchi Opera. Today, modern and experimental elements are infused with a centuries-old art form to appeal to the younger generation.
Kunchi is actually already trying to innovate, for instance, through stage design, lighting, and costume. They've all been modified for today's audience. Before, the design would have been very simple. But today, we do a lot of very ornate headpieces and costumes and lighting effects to complement the performance.
Having been fascinated by Kunchi Opera for years, I'm not going to pass up on the opportunity of a lifetime to try it out myself today.
This is a very interesting characteristic of my role, which is Xiaosheng, a young man, and I have this arc on my forehead. And that tells me, or tells the audience, that this is my role, Xiaosheng, a young man.
After an hour in makeup, it's time to put on the costume and complete my transformation. So here I am, all dressed up as Xiaosheng, which is the young man. And I'm trying very hard right now to invoke the youth in me. If it looks easy, it's not. What looks natural and beautiful in Kunchi takes years of arduous training. Even for someone like me who's used to using my voice, I can't manage to recite a line without sounding like I'm squeaking. There was so much to learn, but all I can think of now is less is more, which is especially true for Kunchi Opera. And here comes my debut on the Kunchi Opera stage.
Still ahead here on Africa Live. Kenya's national museums reopen after a 6-month pandemic hiatus.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
the greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
The National Museums of Kenya has opened its doors to the public after shutting them in March due to COVID-19. Fort Jesus in Mombasa is among these sites struggling with the loss of revenue from ticket sales over the last 6 months.
Fort Jesus in Kenya's port city of Mombasa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is grappling with the challenges of reopening after closing back in March due to COVID-19.
We depend on the revenue and some funding from the ministry to be able to run the museum. But because the revenue was not coming in, then the restoration, maintaining of some of the preservation activities was now stopped.
One of the research area which was affected was the underwater heritage. We are proposing to build an underwater museum within the coast of Kenya.
There was a serious impact whereby the research had to stop. Then it becomes easy now to come to the field, meet the fishermen and discuss, carry out field works, do archaeological surveys.
Across the country, museums have adopted measures to ensure the safety of visitors as well as staff. The cultural institutions have come up with new ways to boost engagement, visits and ultimately revenue.
We now decided to look for other ways, and one of them was online virtual education programs. Last weekend we had, on Saturday or 26th, we had a program about the Swahili kitchen. We also had a virtual program of the tour, so that visitors at home, they can go online and just have a tour of the fort.
With Kenya slowly easing epidemic restrictions, hopefully more people will visit these cultural sites. Cham Hono, CGTN.
In South Africa, artists have been finding ways to market and sell their work even during a hard lockdown. Contemporary painter Bambo Sibiye is presenting his interpretation of not only COVID-19, but also other events that shaped this year. His exhibition is currently underway at the Everard Reed Gallery in Johannesburg. CGTN's Olisa Njamela brings us more on this story.
Visual artist Bambo Sibiye has created a body of work that he says is in reaction to the unattended weakness and unheeded warnings of the new normal. He says his latest exhibition, called Slow Down Tiger, is showcasing that normal is normal. The award-winning artist reflects on current affairs ranging from the confusing positivity and negativity that emerged from this year's unique lockdown circumstances, while touching on both the humanity and brutality that people witnessed, and how the information overload put people on an emotional roller coaster. There are 9 pieces that are featured in this exhibition. Each piece addresses a different issue.
So I was looking at all the things that were happening in 2020. So I'm looking at the Black Lives Matter. I'm looking at the stolen sisters in Africa. I'm looking at protecting the planet. So everything that has been happening in 2020, I just brought that into one box, one space. As an artist, we address issues. We talk about things that affect us. So I was raising an awareness. I was just making people aware that this thing is real. This thing is affecting us. This thing it's now.
Sibiye, who has also exhibited his works internationally, feels that the world needs to pause and reflect because there's so much that has happened this year.
I mean, it's been a tough year. So I'm just saying, you know what, a lot has happened. Let's slow down, you know, as humans. Let's take a pause, you know, and take all in, and we can then respond, you know. There's a lot that has been happening like in a short period of time. 2020 brought everything, you know, it was a surprise. We're all taken aback.
Sibiya produced this body of work in the middle of a lockdown that was necessitated by the need to fight the spread of the coronavirus, a task that proved to be quite tough, he says. The models he uses to illustrate his artwork, like everyone else in the country, were restricted from moving around.
So I had to tell people to take selfies, pose in a certain way, send me pictures. It was really strange also, really strange. I had to, when I take my pictures, I prepare the space. I make sure the lighting is good. I make sure they're well dressed. I make sure, everything is sitting the way I want. But like in this, with this exhibition, I could not do that. People had to do, I had to guide them, and they had to take pictures with their cell phones. The quality, it's a problem. So it was a really, really tough show to produce.
The exhibition is on display for another week. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And coming up in sports, Kenya's Bridget Kosgei braves cold weather to win 40th London Marathon.